talk by a computer scientist who turned out to be the director of a design school in Bangalore, LISAA School of Design. So that's Avi for you, talking about sustainability.
Thank you so much, Ambika, for the sweet, short intro. So I'm going to change the mood of the room for a bit. Yes, we've discussed a lot of intense things, and we'll get back to those. I got an interesting time slot right before the coffee break. After lunch, I thought people might be drowsy. So let's add on to the flavor. And we're going to start with a childhood story. So as the lines go, one morning I came to this glorious place, and I first saw the trees, the truffula trees, the bright colored tufts of the truffula trees. These are the first few lines from the popular children's fiction book, which was published in 1971 by Dr. Seuss, called The Lorax. Yes, I'm sure we have all read it out to our kids. I hope we have. So in the story, Dr. Seuss describes an era which in academia is referred to as Anthropocene. Anthropocene is a period during which human activity has had a dominant effect on our inherent climate and environment. Kind of depicts the steps along the way when humans came in. And so we know the deal. When Wansler comes in and discovers this land, which is abundant in flora and fauna, he starts to wonder, what use can he put the truffula trees to? And Lorax, a mythical orange creature, I'm sure all of our kids love this creature, my kids do, with a yellow mustache emerges when Wansler cuts the first truffula tree. Wansler uses the tuft of the truffula tree to produce a garment, a thing, which everyone needs, so he calls it a thneed. Dr. Seuss lends a voice of reason to Lorax, but alas, despite the many cries by Lorax, Wansler fails to see the damage he is causing to the environment around him and continues to make his thneed factories bigger and bigger. Despite Lorax's timely reminders, Wansler continues to maintain his state of oblivion, fueled by the demands, the growing market, how the industry demands grow higher and higher. And what happens is that the very world that was full of truffula trees now looks like this. And the species, one after the other, start to leave. First, the brown barbaloots leave the forest, then the fish, and in the end, the birds fly away too, while Wansler continues to destroy their homes one tree at a time. Why cut one tree at a time when you can cut many, many more? Let's do that. When finally there comes a day when the last truffula tree falls and Wansler is still far, far away from where he believed he set out to be. Except now, there is nowhere to go. Slowly moving towards his own demise, he will eventually realize the truth, which was always ahead of him, that the end of the truffula trees is also the end of him. As much as we are filled with disdain at this character, Wansler, we must remember there is a Wansler in all of us. Was the human species created with a self-destructive, I'm sorry, this is just how some folks, I just found it very funny and sarcastic, that we've tried to make a fashion trend out of need. Was the human species created with a self-destructive button? David Kowalewski, the author of the book Deep Power, The Political Ecology of Wilderness and Civilization, tries to explore. He also states that if this time our species become extinct, it would be the 6th human extinction on the planet, but the first one we are bringing upon ourselves. Quotes like these sound sordid, dystopian, and give the impression that doomsday is already here. Of course, this can't be true. I might be exaggerating. Our children are our future, and it is for them we want to leave the planet Earth as best as we can. Or do we? Sustainability today remains a very fuzzy phenomenon without clear industry standards, units, or criteria to measure it with. I'm actually currently researching on the quantification of sustainability in garments and clothing, a topic very close to my heart. So with natural resources depleting at alarming rates, increasing global warming and widespread pollution, scientific predictions on the demolition of the planet don't seem like terms that come out of a sci-fi movie, but they are harsh and real, and we may be stared at by them very soon. As pressures grow for the fashion industry to respond more urgently to the climate and environmental emergency, activists question whether fashion shows can ever be sustainable, unless, of course, they are digital. Big Things did a great presentation. Thanks. Despite the multitudes of talks across the spectrum due to the lack of strict regulations around the same brands continue to cause damage to the very earth we inhabit. Here are a few of the recent examples of excessive material usage on various surfaces, apart from the garment itself. So this is October 2021 collection, LVMH, men's autumn wear. So you see. And this is 2022 Chanel collection, where the chairs, the set, everything was decorated with tweed, not just the garments themselves. When brands fail to walk the talk and pay heed to the global need of the hour, it gives rise to a whole lot of fashion protests, parades, climate change protesters, disrupting live shows. Surely their reaction is hyped. Seems like teenage rebellious behavior, doesn't it? Our governments would never let things come to these, or would they? Did you know the world exploded? Did you get the memo? No, I'll tell you. At an event which was organized by the World Economic Forum, David Shapiro, world's leading negotiation expert, conducted an experiment with world business leaders, CEOs of global corporations from around the world, and many others. He divided the 45 of them into groups of 5 each. When these groups were asked to work together to create manifestos with their newly formed teams, they did that, great. Then what went wrong? Then David Shapiro added a twist. He asked the groups to now pick only one of the 9 manifestos, and the deadline was 1 hour. He asked them to imagine a hypothetical scenario where, if they failed, the world would come to an end. What do you think happened? Mutual talks, discussions escalated into chaos. Sadly, they were not successful. So sorry to report, the world exploded that day at the World Economic Forum in Davos. There is one key takeaway from Davos, that the onus to create changes lies on us. Before we head to the Industry 4.0, I am just going to briefly explain. Okay, so we'll just get things a little bit towards Industry 4.0. So I'm sure a lot of you might be aware of this. Just a quick refresher. So Industry 1.0 was all about the introduction of steam engines, and Industry 2.0 was electrification. That is when electricity entered our lives. Industry 3.0 is automation, so we have access to computers. Industry 4.0 is the era we are currently living in, and some of the developed countries have resolved to move towards Industry 5.0, which is Industry 4.0 plus societal values, where development is human-centric. It's a recent phenomenon, Industry 4.0. It was a term coined by Charles Schwab, again, World Economic Forum, 2011. It refers to the era we are currently living in, which is basically all of this. So it includes big data, additive manufacturing, cloud computing, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, IoTs, of course, system integration, simulation, and autonomous robots. It offers many, many benefits. Higher productivity, improved quality of life, new markets, lower barriers to entrepreneurship, lights out factories, which operate completely independent of human intervention, completely independent. This is a phenomenon already happening in South China and Japan at the base of Mount Fuji by a company called Fumac. But Industry 4.0 also comes with a set of perils. What are they? It's already been accused of increasing the divide between rich and poor, and we keep hearing it. It increases the divide, but how does it do that? One of the ways is by using big data. With access to every single thought, idea, and desire in the minds of the consumer, industry giants and technocrats are well equipped to know precisely what the consumer wants and when, while the weaker players are left trying to speculate the same. Another criticism of Industry 4.0 and ICTs is the energy consumption, which until a few years ago was 1% of the global energy production and is estimated to rise to 20% by the year 2030. Cryptocurrency applications such as Bitcoin are using as much electricity as some nations' electrical demands. AI has sparked a lot of ethical debates around us. On the one hand, where it has been used for noble ventures, and I want to show a video around this. It's beautiful. So this is coral reef, which is being preserved by these killer drones that are actually killing the starfish, which is in excess. Sound.
Great Barrier Reef faces another threat. An outbreak of coral-eating crown-of-thorns starfish.
Okay, you can play that, it's okay.
But RangerBot,
Subtitle.
an underwater autonomous drone, has been developed to hunt down and destroy the pest. 2 years in development, RangerBot uses
there's no
vision-based
subtitle.
technologies to monitor the health of the reef and identify the predator.
So these are the killer drones, and all they're using is salt, like bilious salt.
Designed specifically to only find these starfish based on artificial intelligence.
The team says RangerBot can identify the crown-of-thorns starfish with nearly 100% accuracy. Once confirmed, it can deliver a lethal injection which kills the venomous species without harming anything else on the reef.
Okay. It's okay, it's okay. On the other hand, AI is also being used to create bots that sway people along radical political agendas and shaping public values, an activity that was partially behind Trump's presidential win. It's okay. So for us, I believe the takeaway is pretty simple. The outcome of the use or misuse of AI, like any other tool, will depend on the intention, intelligence, and the farsightedness of our leaders, our CEOs, policymakers, and the failure to do so could result in gaps in transparency. Slides. My slides. Thanks. For developing nations, the road ahead seems steeper. With the past, which is defined by a phenomena called the resource curse, which paradoxically means that countries with more natural resources have experienced a slower economic growth and vice versa. So with the past, which is defined by resource curse, and a future that is in dire need of infrastructure, we have huge demands by 2030, huge goals, and alarmingly high rates of pollution, already existing pollution. All speak of the tremendous effort and work that will be needed if we were to pave ourselves out of dire scenarios. How prudently we use our natural resources towards sustainable development will play a huge role in how our destinies chart out. This is the time where we stop playing cat and mice game, as Dr. Larson calls it, between the industry and science, and work together to build micro and macro level solutions for this problem. As of this date, 35 Indian cities have managed to feature themselves in the top 50 most polluted cities in the world. Guess I'll leave you with this. I believe this is the time to awaken the Lorax in us and realize that we are in charge of the last truffula seeds. Thank you very much.
Like you discussed about the sustainability and the industry 4.0. But can you give some more light how this industry 4.0 can help us in achieving higher sustainability? Like AI is one of the tools, one of the tools of the industry 4.0. So can you give some more light how this can help to achieve higher sustainability for the textile industry? Thank you.
I think it's a great question. It's also a question that I am personally researching right now, and maybe not too many details about it I can share. I've already discussed that with Ambika. I may not be able to discuss too many details at this point. But I think when we talk about the challenges as well, so those are, for especially a country like us, it's going to create huge gaps, I'm sure, with regards to unemployment. But as I'm currently researching this particular topic, so I'm going to refrain from answering it in too much detail at this point. I hope that's okay. What I can share with you right now is the term called greenwashing, which is basically what the critics believe is happening, in the sense that under the name of sustainability, I mean, we are just being sold the very same stuff. All right, so in terms of regulations and in terms of setting up indices and matrices is going to be something that the industry should look at this point. So I'm talking about quantification and standardization. You see what I'm saying, right? I also found a lot of disparity. So in my research, I discovered a lot of disparity in the numbers that we are gathering around sustainability. So one of the terms is known as genuine savings, and it's not the term that you generally hear when you're buying a home, but it's actually a term which kind of encompasses the environmental expenditure that a country is going through, let's say, which is rich in natural resource. So it's spending that, but then is that country reinvesting that money in its natural resource so that that particular resource is more sustainable in nature for that country? So that is known as genuine savings in green accounting. But the data is hard to find. So I think there's a lot of scope of research in terms of that as well.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you for this night session, and we can always discuss more.